As funding of Southwest Light Rail moves forward from Washington to Hennepin County and metro area agencies, the project pulls into the Green Line State Capitol Station.
And then the impact on business, on our economy, 1,000-fold.
When you look at the role of federal government, it should really be about partnering with state and local government to build the communities that we want to live in.
Minnetonka's Jon Tollefson is running for Congress in Congressional District 3. We're going to meet him. CNN and Fox News may need a circus of pundits to hyperventilate about candidate polls and gaffes, but we do it with a Minnesota truck driver. This is Democratic Visions. Here's Tim O'Brien.
Jon Tollefson grew up in Hopkins and Minnetonka. Jon calls Minnetonka home, but he's actually lived and worked in Washington, D.C., Nigeria, and Mexico. Jon's running for Congress. Jon, welcome to Democratic Visions.
Thanks so much, Tim. It's good to be here.
Jon, as of today, February 24, you're the only announced candidate planning and hoping to get the DFL endorsement to run against Republican Erik Paulsen. Now, there may be others, but you're the first one out of the gate. That endorsement could occur on May 14 when the 3rd Congressional District holds its convention in Osseo. In the meantime, you'll be campaigning at Senate District meetings and conventions in the 3rd Congressional District. What are you going to tell them?
Well, Tim, I've been out to several Senate District meetings already, and I'm going to be at all of them by the end of the convention season. And what we're talking about is restoring our values, true Minnesota values, in our representation in Washington. A lot of people have trusted in Erik Paulsen to serve our needs and to represent us in Washington. But as we look at his record, as we understand more about where he stands on issues, we're starting to realize that he's just not standing with us when we need him to be standing with us. And so we're talking at the Senate District level, all throughout the DFL, and with folks who aren't as active in political parties, who just want good representation in Washington. We're talking about issues with higher education, issues with Medicare and Social Security, protecting that so that it's there for the long run. National security, a lot of people are scared with what's going on in the world right now. And I bring that experience with my foreign service background and really want to make sure that we're addressing the needs that need to be addressed in Washington, not just these partisan games that go back and forth and really lead to nothing happening.
The 3rd District stretches from Bloomington to Champlin. We have people that need help, we've got a middle class, and we have some privileged people in the district too. Now, on the positive side, Obama carried the 3rd Congressional District twice, and I believe it's trending blue, but it's not there yet. On the negative side, Erik Paulsen's got a $2 million war chest, and he's been waxing Democrats that have run against them. So weigh positives against the negatives and tell me how you're going to accomplish what you're setting out to do.
But as you said, President Obama won this district both times he ran here. The voters of the 3rd District are largely independent, but they are not at all the conservative type of people that we would see supporting Donald Trump, for example, or Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio. What we're going to do is connect with voters on the issues that matter to them most. So we're going to look at health care and education, higher education, transportation, national security, and we're going to help display that contrast between what Republicans in Congress, including Erik Paulsen, are trying to do and what we need done for us here in the community. We're going to be talking with all of the different diverse populations within the district. The demographics have changed over the last 10 years, significantly so since the time that Erik Paulsen was first elected. We have a wonderful group of people here who have core values that we all share. Integrity, hard work, and as part of that, we expect the government to do what we need done in an efficient, effective way, and without all this frivolous partisan rancor that we see happening. Really, government should be very simple, getting the job done, making key investments where we need them so that we can grow our economy and build the communities that we want to live in.
I want to touch on one of the points that you mentioned there, Jon, and that is that you described the constituency of the 3rd District as being a lot of independent voters. And it's sort of ironic that when Eric Paulson first ran for office, he ran as an independent Republican, and now and then you'd hear him say, you know, I'm an independent. Well, I looked up the numbers, and he's voted like 96% lockstep with the Republican Party. Do you think he'd be able to drive that point home?
Absolutely. And when voters hear that, they are turned off by Eric Paulson. I mean, if you went down the list, you would have Michelle Bachmann and Eric Paulson just check, 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 all the way down the list. Eric Paulson is not a moderate. He tries to come off as this way, and he kind of follows the old mantra of keep your head down, stick around. But in turn, he doesn't get much done for us. And because he's keeping his head down, he's not working on the issues that we need him to be working on. He's not really moving the ball forward for any of us in any significant way. So what we need to discuss here is how our independent values in the 3rd District don't coincide with the far right wing of the Republican Party that he seems to be aligned with now. He just endorsed Marco Rubio the other day, the Koch brothers, their main political advisor.
That's Marco Rubio, who said that he wouldn't approve any appointment to the Supreme Court unless that person turned over the Marriage Equality Act?
That's exactly right. He said that on Meet the Press just a couple months ago.
Wow.
That he would not nominate or support any Supreme Court nominee unless they were to overturn marriage equality throughout the country. He's just not in line with the values of the 3rd District.
And that's the message you're going to be bringing out to the voters in the 3rd District?
That's right. And it's also important for us to talk about how we are standing for something and we want to move the country forward, move our community forward. And so I won't just be focusing on the current congressman and his values, because a lot of people in the district don't want to just hear about how he's hurting us or not moving the country forward. They want to see a vision that has that in mind. As someone who has been in government, worked in the Foreign Service, worked here on policy issues in healthcare and economic development, I have a strong vision for our community, and I want to see that done.
You know, you came back from the Foreign Service and went to work in Minnesota as an advocate for various organizations. What did you learn from that work, and how can you make that of assistance going forward if you get elected?
Well, after I served in the Foreign Service in Nigeria and Mexico and in Washington, D.C. in the Africa Bureau, where I worked on Somali affairs and public diplomacy, which was particularly interesting for me because of the Somali community that's here in the Twin Cities. I actually got to lead several trips back here to the Twin Cities for the State Department doing political outreach. And when I left the Foreign Service, my last assignment was in Mexico City. And I returned here to work for Margaret Anderson Kelleher, who was a former Speaker of the House and ran for governor.
Clean Tech?
That's right. It was the Minnesota High Tech Association. We did economic development work for Minnesota around science and technology. And that included education for STEM studies, science, technology, engineering, and math, as well as investing in internships for science and technology students studying at Minnesota colleges and universities to hook them up with small science and technology businesses in Minnesota through a very innovative internship program. And we worked on actually helping startup companies in technology to grow right here in Minnesota, because that's where we really find job growth for our economy. You know, we haven't had an IPO for quite some time in Minnesota, and this is how it happens. You have companies starting up that we all kind of band together into support, and then they grow from one person to 3 people, all the way up to 20,000.
Then they're out of the garage and looking for an office
Exactly,
space.
That's right. And then they're really a solid part of our economy. That's how so many of our companies have grown up in Minnesota. And then now I work for the Minnesota Nurses Association, where we work on ensuring that all Minnesotans have access to affordable health care so that patients receive care when they need it without regard to whether or not they can afford to pay the bill at the end of the day. And that's not just for people who are on medical assistance. That's for all of us. We all are seeing our premiums go up. We have higher deductibles, higher out-of-pocket costs, and it's really spiraling in the wrong direction. We need to get costs under control, and there are a number of ways that we're working on that at the Nurses Association.
Do you see any specific ideas that you could bring forward to address the income inequality situation we find ourselves in right now?
Well, we need to start by making strong investments in early childhood education, in K-12 education, and in higher education. Everyone needs to have an opportunity and access to succeed at each of those levels. We can't settle for anything less than that. There is no greater investment we could make in our economy, in our society, than with strong education investment. You know, a lot of folks who are even on the conservative side support education in extraordinary ways. After World War II, when the government came in and said, we're going to make a strong investment in higher education, and people like my grandparents had access to education for the first time. It just grew in tremendous levels, and those are the investments we need to be making in our society and in our economy to see that growth happen, so that all of us rise. As many have said before us, including Paul Wellstone, we all do better when we all do better. And when we make these investments, we rise.
Jon, let's do a little projection here. You won. You're in Washington, D.C. First day in office. What are you looking forward to? What issue or issues are going to be at the top of the heap?
Well, on my first day in Congress, I look forward to voting for a Democratic Speaker of the House so that we don't have any 2 more years with Paul Ryan or anyone else from that caucus. You know, we need to get to work on improving health care for all Americans and for everyone in our community. We need to work on getting transportation that actually moves people around, picks them up where they are, gets them to where they need to be, and then back home again. We can build these systems that serve all of us for transportation, whether it's Southwest Light Rail Line, the light rail line up to Brooklyn Park and Brooklyn Center, and we can make these investments in ways that increase property value, increase development within our communities, where we can walk around, have mobility without relying on cars. When you look at the role of federal government, it should really be about partnering with state and local government to build the communities that we want to live in.
So Jon, tell me, what do you like about the 3rd Congressional District?
Well, Tim, to me it's about wonderful economic and cultural vibrancy of the Twin Cities. Plus we have the outdoors. We have the woods and the lakes, and people can play outside or be outside and enjoy nature in all 4 seasons. I love hanging out in Excelsior, going down to Maynard's for a burger. My grandma used to take the streetcar out to Hopkins for a movie at the theater, and then all the way out to Excelsior and go to the amusement park that was out there.
Go to Dance Land?
That's right, yeah. And we just have this wonderful place to live and to play and to be with our family and friends. And my dad keeps his fish house out on Lake Minnetonka, and so we go out there in January and February and play cards and fish.
And do whatever else is done in those fish
houses.
houses.
It's not really about the fishing
Tell
so
stories.
much. Yeah.
Well, Jon, now, if we can flip, that is change 30 Republican seats into 30 Democratic seats, we can take over Congress for the Democrats again, and the country will be well along in its goals and aspirations. Jon, I hope you're one of those 30. Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks so much, Tim. It's great to talk to you.
As March begins, 83% of the funding for the Southwest Light Rail project has been committed. More good news. President Obama has recommended $125 million for Southwest Light Rail. That $125 million will be the 2nd federal installment for the project. The feds are committed to pay half of the $1.79 billion budget. Last year, the scope of the Green Line extension from Eden Prairie to Target Field, Minneapolis, was pared down to 14.5 miles and 15 new stations. Governor Mark Dayton is asking the legislature to come up with its share of the $135 million this session. But
there are controversial things about some of these transportation plans. One of them is transit. It doesn't have the broad bipartisan support all across the state that I think people wish that it had.
For someone to come out here, a leader of the state to come out here and say transit is controversial, it's controversial in the Tea Party wing of the Republican Party.
That request and the critical importance of Southwest Light Rail to the region and to the 5 cities it connects and services was on the mind of Eden Prairie Council member Ron Case. Ron met with producer Jeff Strait in late February.
So tell me, if you had an opportunity to talk directly to our local legislators about the responsibility for funding the rest of the Green Line from Minneapolis out to Eden Prairie, Ron, what would you tell them?
I would say get on the train, so to speak, because the momentum is building. And the federal part is such a huge part, and the momentum seems to be there. We've got the other pieces of the local government parts, and so the state part, boy, would that be a shame, especially since it's not a small share, but significant to federal government. It's a smaller share, and what a shame if they were the ones that held this up. So I totally understand the perspective that budgets in general across the nation at all levels of government could be perceived as being high if it just is higher than what somebody thinks it ought to be. Is this a lot of money? It's a lot of money. We spend a lot of money, though, on roads. We spend a lot of money in the city of Eden Prairie on our parks, on our schools. I mean, in our society, we prioritize through our money giving, through our tax dollars, we prioritize the things that representative government believes is the best for everyone. And you don't have to go back too far, but go into the 50s and 60s when the United States was building the interstate highway system. That was a really expensive price tag back then, and it probably looked not needed. I mean, roads, big four-lane highways shooting across North Dakota, nothing against North Dakota, but very few people would argue that the dollars spent back then on those 1950s dollars level rate,
sure,
and then the impact on business, on our economy, 1,000-fold. Now, is that the same true with mass transit? Well, again, if you look in some cities, and I realize others, skeptics would say they have higher critical mass density, but you look at places like Boston, New York, Chicago, I mean, they thrive on their mass transit. So can we perceive or foresee a Twin Cities in 30 to 40 to 50 years that, again, they'll look back going, great decision, guys, because, and women, it's not a
sure,
male term. The decision that we made today had great foresight to it. So I think the decision for the whole Twin Cities is a very good one. Now back to Eden Prairie then, and the decision, is it good for us? I think that's why the Chamber sees it as a positive. Each of these stations brings with it amazing economic development opportunities, not to mention for the people living in Eden Prairie that opportunity to take mass transit, not to mention to bring workers out to Eden Prairie. But had we in some way, I guess, spent lots of money, gone to court, somehow, whatever, we blocked it, and it was decided, well, let's take it into Minnetonka or take it into Bloomington, I just got to believe in 30 to 40 years, our then city council people and residents would go, you did what?
I'd say the city council in 4 years would
well, no doubt. But I mean, I think the evidence of that will be so crystal clear,
sure,
probably long before 30 years. But I think it's definitely the right decision for Eden Prairie.
So LRT has no problem with the city of Eden Prairie, Minnetonka, Hopkins, St. Louis Park, or Minneapolis. At least the city councils have all approved of this, correct?
Absolutely. They've approved to the extent that they were given power to approve municipal consent, which is not a yea or nay on the entire project, but on the pieces that pertain to their cities. But absolutely, all along the way, every city thus far has given municipal consent twice.
Now, there are more things that are going to come in front of the city of Eden Prairie. For instance, the construction of the new ramp, the new parking ramp
sure,
at Southwest Station. That's all going to be weighed in by the City Council and the Planning Commission and
correct,
citizens. So it's not over yet. It's just kind of tweaking a general concept plan. There's been a lot of input from the various communities along the alignment from Minneapolis out to Eden Prairie. Mayors, council members on the project advisory committee. There's the community advisory committee, the business advisory committee, the county. And I have seen changes made because people have spoke out here in Eden Prairie. At one point, our city wanted the alignment to go down Single Tree Lane, and that's been changed. Why did that change? Because our business community, certain citizens, and the Met Council people said, hey, look, Eden Prairie, the city staff, it might be better off here.
Totally.
And it happened. So people have had an effect on it. I know at a recent council meeting also, you were talking about the need to make sure that Southwest Station looks really good as the Southwest Transit Station does now. And that was brought up too in the committee I serve on, the Community Advisory Committee. And that's going to happen. So people have input on this thing.
No, absolutely. I mean, there's always going to be skeptics and maybe cynics, and I don't say that negatively. I mean, I think that's an important part of democracy. But there's always going to be a handful of people that are against something and believing that this has been pushed down the throats by a few people. But the reality, if you study this going back a dozen years, this is almost like committee slow death or something. I mean, this is like a total total slow. This is exactly what some people don't like about government. It's almost like you can't have it both ways, but
Sure.
This has been committed through years and years and years, and painstakingly taking testimony and recording all testimony. And so, I mean, this has been very thoroughly studied. We represent people, and so if one could argue over the course of the time that this decision's been being made, we've had, well, 4, I guess, if not 5, city council elections where people have had the chance to unseat people who were voting the wrong way on something.
You know, our population in Eden Prairie, like Edina, is growing older and older. People want to stay here and they want to live here. They don't want to drive down 35W or the crosstown to get there. Senior citizens, our student population going to junior colleges and the University of Minnesota, they're going to have another way of getting to Minneapolis, to the campus of the University of Minnesota.
Right.
And there aren't commuter buses available all the time. There will be a light rail transit train, the Green Line, going from our town to the colleges, to the businesses, to the theaters. Mm-hmm. And people commuting not just from Eden Prairie, but also just to Hopkins or to St. Louis Park. There are jobs going to be created there too. The Met Council itself projects this line will be rolling in 2020. So I'm hoping that the state legislature this year mm-hmm. will appropriate its share of this money.
Absolutely. I would hope that the Eden Prairie and Minnetonka, and maybe in Bloomington, Edina, Hopkins, all those legislators would definitely get behind this and quickly and do what has to be done.
Now, I would think that with the coming election, that a vote for state funding for LRT is going to help people get reelected. That's my opinion, and
well,
I'm sticking with it. Now, this thing's going to be completed in 2020. How about you and I jumping on the train, going to downtown St. Paul and seeing a St. Paul Saints baseball game?
Let's do it. We'll shake on
it.
Good.
Unlike CNN and Fox News, we here feel that you do not need to hear from 4 to 8 experts to explain to you what Marco Rubio might have meant or to measure the fallout of another gaffe by Donald Trump. Not here on Democratic Visions. Right now we're doing well enough with a truck driver. Bruce Baird delivers newspapers in the night shift in the metro area. Bruce and Jeff Strait recently took a closer look at TV spots being run by remaining Republican presidential candidates. What they saw was not pretty.
They said it was political suicide. My opponents attacked me.
One thing I've noticed, I don't think Ted Cruz's flag pin is nearly big enough. Tiny thing on his lapel.
Yeah, that could be a problem.
It could be.
Abolish the IRS and defend the Constitution.
Yeah. No, I am feeling a little more patriotic. I wish I had a flag pin now.
I won't flinch. I will stand firm with the American people, whether Washington likes it or not.
No wonder conservatives like Rush Limbaugh are saying,
there is no other choice for you in this campaign than Ted Cruz. This is the closest in our lifetimes we have ever been to Ronald Reagan.
I'm Ted Cruz.
It's good to see Rush. That helped a lot.
Well, anyway, there's a commercial I saw the other day. It's right here.
Yeah.
Roll it right here.
Yeah.
You know, when I first saw this commercial regarding putting up that wall between Mexico and, say, Texas and New Mexico and Arizona, with the guys in the business suits, the attorneys, people who went to journalism school.
The politics of it would be very, very different if a bunch of lawyers or bankers were crossing the Rio Grande. Or if a bunch of people with journalism degrees were coming over and driving down the wages in the press. Then we would see stories about the economic calamity that is befalling our nation.
It's scary.
It terrified me, you know, and not that anyone's going to take my job, you know, because I barely want my job. But, you know, the attorneys, I suppose they like their jobs if they can find one. I don't know what to make of Ted Cruz, and I don't know what to make of his popularity. He's a terrifying person. There's a lot on the internet that he is the Zodiac killer, and Ted hasn't refuted it. He hasn't addressed it at all. You know, Ted's a true believer. Okay, I've got one here for you, Jeff, from Marco Rubio. Have you seen this one?
You see, my father was grateful for the work he had. But That was not the life he wanted for his children. He wanted all the dreams he once had for himself to come true for us.
Holy mackerel.
Okay, so his dad was a bartender.
Yeah.
He's got my vote.
Yeah, and he looked like a good one. You know, I like that outfit, and I don't know if you can get those anymore, but that was very period piece, and it made me want to look at his record a little more closely.
Let's go to another Marco Rubio commercial.
Yeah, let's take a look at that.
Today, more men and women are out of work than ever before in our nation.
You know, that first harbor shot was actually Vancouver, Canada.
Yeah.
It became a big deal on social media and all the critics. But hey, what's the difference for a harbor shot between that and Baltimore or Los Angeles, Long Beach Harbor?
No, it's all America to him.
It's morning again in America.
Well, Jeff, I don't really want to upset your stomach that much, but maybe you want to take a look at this next one.
Who's it from?
I have a great education. I went to an Ivy League college, but I'm not politically correct. Because to be politically
well,
correct, too much.
Let's go on to the next one, okay?
I don't have to call anybody. I can do this so easy. It's too easy. I do it with a phone call.
And he referred to my hands. If they're small, something else must be small. I guarantee you there's no problem. I guarantee it.
I am a Christian. I'm proud of it. Okay.
Every election, it seems to be getting more absurd.
Yeah, it's improving.
My first day in office.
We've got to clean the air out. Here's one from Hillary and one from Bernie.
Her parents abandoned her when she was just 8 years old. She was mistreated, but she never gave up. And she taught me to do the same. My mom's life and what she went through are big reasons why standing up for kids.
Here's the simple truth, that in America we have millions and millions of working people who are working hard but are not making enough money to put bread on the table or to take care of their kids, and that has got to end. Today, all over America.
So, Bernie Sanders won the caucus vote here in Minnesota. The votes are proportional, so each is kind of a winner. Feeling better?
That helped.
We've got a lot more of this stuff coming on.
Yeah, maybe more than we need.
How about a cigar?
A cigar might help too.
It would.
Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time.
Democratic Visions is independently crafted by volunteers, mostly Democrats, from Eden Prairie, Minnetonka, Edina, and Bloomington.